yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida for 5 minutes.
Yield to Mr. Jordan.
I think jump for you. Mr. Knight, do you need a gun registration list if government can just go ask the banks every time some customer purchases a gun?
Well, the banks won't know if you purchased a gun per se, but your bank records can be a pretty good, though not perfect, registration for almost anything.
But my point is it's almost like a backdoor registration, right?
Yes, one of the challenges is that highly sensitive information can be accessed through financial records that otherwise is constitutionally protected.
Yeah. Dr. Peterson, do you think they're just going to stop with conservatives? I mean, my history tells us that the cancel culture mob, the surveillance state, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't just, they never are satisfied with just certain people. It always expands. And I'll give you an example. A few years ago, Senator Feinstein, iconic Democrat senator from the great state of California, the folks in San Francisco renamed the Dianne Feinstein Elementary School. They took her name off the school because they found that she said something like 40 years ago that the cancel culture mob didn't like. So even a liberal Democrat senator wasn't good enough for the mob. They came after her too. And this is the thing that scares me. We've invited probably more Democrat witnesses in front of this committee than any other committee, because we invite Democrats to come in and say, we respect the First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, respect the Constitution. My concern is it never just stops with certain people. It always goes further. Do you agree with that?
Well, the reason I prefaced my remarks with an insistence on nonpartisanship is because the danger posed by this increasing ability of governments and large corporations to collude threatens everyone's freedom equally. And it could well be that at the moment, and this is, I think, the case the Republicans here are trying to make, is that the people who are in the sights of that collusion tend to have more conservative leanings, but that will shift in a moment whenever the political tides shift. And we're concentrating in this hearing a fair bit on the specific events of January 6th, a very partisan issue that produces a very intense partisan divide, but we're not addressing the fundamental issue here directly, which is that our new technology enables a mode of surveillance that's so intense and all-pervading that no one will escape its purview regardless of their political views.
No, I think that's exactly right. And there also seems to me, and I'll go to Mr. Tedesco, there seems to be a pattern emerging. I'm going to take you back to when we first kind of started getting into this issue with the somewhat famous now school board's memorandum from the Department of Justice. And I know you probably remember what I'm talking about here, Mr. Tedesco. But the opening sentence of the Attorney General's document, this memorandum, says, in recent months, there's been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, threats of violence against school administrators, board members, teachers, staff who participate in the vital work of running our nation's public schools. At the hearing where we had the Attorney General, I asked him a simple question. I said, you make that opening statement as the basis for why you need this memorandum to go after moms and dads showing up at school board meetings. What was that first sentence based on? And he told us it was based on the National School Boards Association, the memorandum they put out. And the same thing happened to you guys, because we had some entity here called the Global Disinformation Index puts out this information, and then the government uses that information as the basis to say you're some terrorist group. That is frightening. That our government, because FinCEN, the Treasury Department, used what some agency put out, or not agency, some entity put out as a basis to say you guys are some hate group or some terrorist group. Yep. I find that alarming, and particularly the pattern that it, I guess two doesn't make a pattern, but it sure makes you start to wonder. Your thoughts, Mr. Tedesco?
Sure, the FBI used the SPLC's report on radical traditional Catholics to target them as well in the interim between the Moms for Liberty and parental rights groups and what's going on today. I think it's very alarming that the government uses these obviously partisan and discredited third-party, arbiters of truth who really are just promoting their own political agenda and trying to do damage to their perceived political enemies to make decisions about anything, let alone sending them to financial institutions as part of some kind of financial surveillance scheme. Yeah.
Some left-wing group says you're bad. Oh, then the government's going to use that information to send out to banks and say, you might want to be concerned about this. You maybe want to debank these individuals. That is a frightening world. And the point is, I don't think it's going to be just limited to conservative people in the future. Because we've already seen examples. There were people in Black Lives Matter who got targeted during the summer of 2020 when all the protests were happening around the country. And I disagree with some of the things, a lot of the things that happened that summer, but I also don't like the fact that they're going after liberals either. That's a scary thing. And then there used to be an agreement in both parties that First Amendment activity should be protected. Second Amendment activity, your right to privacy should be protected. But unfortunately now it's gotten way too